I'm back at the Brentwood Centre at Phoenix FM and continuing the Mental Health Matters podcast. And I have the pleasure of being joined now by Lorna Slade, a wonderful therapist who over the recent years has been specialising in narcissistic abuse syndrome. Is that the name of it?
It's narcissistic abuse, really.
Okay. Yeah, because you've been on the previous incarnation of the podcast with Bob Simpson.
That's right,
yes.
And
when you were kind of starting your journey down this more specialised approach to your work. And so I just wanted to find out a bit more about you and about narcissistic abuse and what you've been seeing and learning more about it. So if you want to just do a quick introduction of yourself and your work.
Yeah, I work with mostly adult children of narcissistic parents, especially covert narcissists. And I've been specialising in that for the last 5 years. And I've been noticing more and more some incredible similarities. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about that today.
Yes, of course. So you've now been specialising in narcissistic abuse. Let's perhaps outline what it is.
So NPD, I'll call it, narcissism is a spectrum disorder. So at the milder end, a person can have a few narcissistic traits. But at the other end, you have full-blown narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, which, according to the DSM-V, which is the American Bible of Mental Health Disorders, you need 5 of 9 criteria to be diagnosed with NPD, which includes a lack of empathy, being preoccupied with fantasies about success, power and beauty, taking advantage of others, and being envious of others. Now, NPD is part of the cluster B group of personality disorders in the DSM that are characterised by the person tending to be manipulative and self-focused. If they do something that upsets you, they're likely to turn around and say that your reaction has hurt them.
Yeah, I think I've seen examples of that. And that's definitely a character trait that is becoming common. We were just talking just now. I said how I've seen it in some workplaces where people can be like that, and in some relationships as well. And so how have you been noticing it? What's the work you're specifically work on? You say it's with parents and children?
Yeah, I've been working especially, there are 2 types of narcissists. I mean, the jury is out in terms of how they're formed, and I often get asked that.
Yeah.
But I think one of the theories that appeals to me that I see in the client stories is that as a child, the narcissist, subject to a parent's anger or shaming behaviour, goes into a form of shock. And they rationalise that by deciding they're a bad person who deserved it. And in the process, they split themselves into 2 parts, a good child and a bad child. And they disown the feelings of the bad child by repressing them in their subconscious and present only the good child to survive their environment. The good child is the mask the narcissist presents to the world, and this false self has an excessive need for attention and admiration in adulthood. This is thought to be due to a lack of what's called mirroring or recognition and pride in the child's achievements. So that attention, or supply as it's termed, is something the narcissist needs, like oxygen, to bolster their self-identity and self-esteem. And so as adults, the pathology of narcissists is that they typically operate with a split consciousness as a result of that early experience. And with their own children especially, they'll do something called triangulate. So they tend to have a golden child who's in receipt of all their good child, grandiose feelings and aspirations, and a scapegoat child who's the recipient of all their bad child projections that they deny. So many of my client stories are about the golden child scapegoat dynamic, which carries on into adulthood and is particularly upsetting and dysfunctional for the family.
That can actually have bad results for both children. Actually, the golden child can distort their perception of reality, and then, as of course, the child that receives all the negative attention, that's certainly going to cause huge problems.
That's right. I mean, there are 2 types of narcissists. There's a grandiose type and a covert type. Now, the covert type will be just as dangerous and exhibit those traits, but in a more subtle way, so will be less hard to spot, certainly by outsiders. But certainly the scapegoat of a covert will be in receipt of that stuff and really feel it.
Okay.
And the problem is, because the covert is good at doing their stuff mostly behind closed doors, the child isn't believed.
Yes.
A big job is to validate their experience, I find.
Okay, so how do you get in touch with these children that have experienced this?
Well, they contact me, and oddly, not oddly perhaps, they are often in their early 50s, which is a time when a real awakening seems to happen, that hang on, this is really not right,
Yeah.
and it needs to stop. And
It's a shame it couldn't happen earlier, that people have these awareness.
absolutely, and sometimes it does.
Yeah.
But sometimes when clients are younger, it's a harder journey to accept what's really going on and be ready for maybe no contact with that parent.
Oh, I see. So, because I would have thought the opposite, that if you're able to find children, perhaps who are still teenagers, that have been experienced this situation, that addressing it then would, obviously you could get quicker results to solve the problem. But I guess if they don't recognise it at that point.
And that depends on their experience and their personality. It might be, I've had clients who at 19 are very clear they want no contact. I've had clients in their 20s.
So that's basically no contact is a big part of
it's something
solving
that,
this.
Yeah, it is. And I never advise it because I'm not allowed to as a therapist, but I would advocate it as the only way to heal, properly heal.
That's interesting because I've come across this recently more in terms of relationship issues, just from heartbreak and things like that. I came across a coach recently who does advocate no contact, but not just to give them the sign that to try and win them back or anything by saying that I'm intentionally doing this, but it's to focus on yourself and self healing and stuff like that. Give yourself a time period of not having any contact with them, so you heal yourself, but then actually just get on with your life. In this case, it sounds like it's a very similar technique because by not seeing them or hearing from them, or then allowing them to communicate with you, because then that's the main ways that they can affect you, is by manipulating your mind and playing tricks and things like that.
Absolutely, because one of their traits is gaslighting, where they will absolutely deny or distort what was said or what went on, and you will be part of a smear campaign, so they'll tell other people those lies. And the problem is, because they're part of that cluster B group, in their perception they genuinely believe that's what went on. They have that ability to tell themselves.
I had a housemate like that who was gaslighting. And it's crazy when you see it happening, and the two sides.
You can imagine growing up with that as a child.
Yeah.
I'm seeing clients mostly with CPTSD because that
Right.
long-term chronic trauma affects them mentally and physically. So the work is, to heal that inner critic, to manage those emotional flashbacks. But what has shocked me, I think, is the way that the damage it does is so profound. I've had clients who've been hospitalised by a parent's cruel words and actions.
Well, just in terms of the really extreme...
The shock of that, the trauma. And already their bodies are primed to be, they've had enough trauma, the body, so any more is enough to send them over the edge.
Yeah.
And in childhood, that parent's lack of interest and empathy has often endangered their safety. So they already don't feel that safe in the world.
Of course,
as adults. Others have lost contact with their own children after they were poisoned against them by the narcissistic grandparents, because that's another thing that they'll do. They'll go straight for the children of the scapegoat and say, "This is my story. Your mum's, a bad person."
Oh, no.
And if the child believes that, you can imagine the damage that does. In all cases, the golden child dynamic is still playing out with the bullying and abusive brother or sister still vying for prime position with the parents. But of course, the well is really empty. There is no love to give because they can't. And accepting that is another challenge.
Yes.
That your parent can't love you. You can imagine how hard that can be for some people.
Yes, of course. And one of the causes you mentioned there, when you said that you have these two sides to you, that's a big problem. I think it's very common now for people to have the negative voice in their minds. There's lots of people talking about healing things of this positive self-talk and things like that. That's an epidemic on its own, this negative self-talk we have in us. So there's some cause of us being brought up that causes this voice in our head.
Yeah, it's absolutely punitive. It's the parental critic mostly. And the job at hand is to thought stop those thoughts, to really realise that you are in charge of your own mind and your own thoughts.
That's a powerful realisation, but at the same time difficult to...
Very difficult, and it can take years.
It's a technique that, like training a muscle, you can get there, but you have to be very, very disciplined and on the ball with that.
Absolutely.
And it brought to mind, when you mentioned PTSD side of it, I came across Richard Grannon. It wasn't specifically because of the narcissistic abuse, it was more because of the PTSD, actually, because of the inner critic. Have had a time when it was just driving me mad, and he had some good advice on that front, and that's when he kind of came up with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's managing those emotional flashbacks, because
Yeah.
you can often suddenly wake up, feel absolutely terrible and not know why.
Yeah.
And it is about self-care and nurturing yourself and saying, okay, I'm in flashback. This goes back years.
Yeah.
It's still in me, but I'm managing it now.
Yeah, and this has big effects on just general relationships, because not necessarily from the narcissistic side, but if people are trying to heal or avoid this negative self-talk by being with someone who they can get some kind of positive affirmation from them, they hopefully that this external person can, love them and
Yeah, well, the worst thing you can do,
Yeah.
when you understand that the love and compassion and everything that you need is within you,
yeah,
and you don't need it from anyone else,
Yeah.
then you've healed.
Yeah. yeah,
And you've let go of that desire for love from anyone, let alone the parent.
Yeah.
And you love yourself.
yeah.
Yeah, that's profound. And that's where the inner child work that I use is that transformative work for that.
Fantastic. That's I did a little bit of that. I came across John Bradshaw. Yeah, and he did some great works on some TV series as well, and that was really useful on that front.
And this is a void disorder. It's about as much what the parent didn't do as what they did.
Yeah.
Because you can get ignoring and engulfing narcissists.
Right.
So if anyone can be described as lucky, it might be that you have an ignoring parent, because an engulfing parent, for example, will infantilize you into adulthood.
Right,
And
yes.
say, right, stay at home, here's the money, here's the food, here's the dinner.
Yeah.
Don't leave.
Yeah.
Because they have abandonment schema, narcissists, and they want to control you. So the child suddenly thinks, what the hell's going on? Or may not, and then
Yeah.
wonder why they're angry and confused and, brittle and
Yeah.
entitled.
Yeah, I've
So
seen
the
that as
damage,
well.
yeah.
That's very common in society at the moment. There's a very big comfort level people have and are afraid to leave their comfort zone, and a lot of that is external factors because of the financial situation and things like that. But you see people they're living at home in their 20s and 30s, and it's a bit of a problem at times.
Yeah, and you can imagine having a narcissistic parent is the reason for that,
Right.
separate to finances or, other
Yeah, of
more
course.
practical reasons.
Yeah.
And depending on the client's original response to trauma, which can be fight, flight, freeze, or fawn,
Yeah.
we would look at how they behave in this current time. They might be codependent, they might be narcissistic themselves, they might be perfectionists, they might have OCD. Many of these are reactions to that childhood early environment.
So you've really listed some ways to identify the narcissistic tendencies. Are there
I
any
mean,
more?
yeah, there are. So I've noticed we talked about the lack of empathy. That's core. The grandchildren being got at, the golden child sibling. Often the narcissistic parent sabotages with malicious acts important days for the scapegoat, weddings, graduations. They'll make sure something goes on that really throws them off.
No.
Because the narcissist is out for the supply.
Yeah.
It's a very simple formula. They'll do stuff if they can get a rise out of you. So the idea is you refuse to become a source of supply.
Yeah.
You stay grounded and you just observe
Yeah.
what they're up to. And the more you know about NPD, the more you can do that. So, they sabotage. They will run down the scapegoat's new partner. They'll run down the scapegoat to the new partner, so they sabotage relationships.
That's very common, isn't
be
it?
careful not to bring a girlfriend or boyfriend home, because
Yeah.
they use money as a tool to control both the golden child and scapegoat. And another almost constant theme I'm noticing is that the scapegoat is disinherited, with everything going to the golden child. At the very least, they're tormented around legal matters to do with the parent's death or impending death. And what more powerful way for an ARC parent to show their hatred of the scapegoat than disinheritance?
Yeah.
So it's really common. Indirect communication, many of my clients have felt the need to write a letter to their parents.
Yeah.
And I say, please don't.
Yeah.
It won't work.
Yeah.
No amount of bargaining
Yeah.
will work. The work is on yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. So since getting involved with this, and you've just been immersed in it, and now it's pretty much your speciality.
Totally.
How was
yeah.
your journey with that? It was just noticing that you were meeting more and more people that had this problem.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah?
I have clients all over the UK, mostly via Skype.
Right.
And they come to me knowing about narcissism. So
Okay.
they're pretty, that's a good basis.
Okay.
To start with.
So you were before you just a general more just sort of therapist, or
As a psychotherapist, yes,
Yeah.
specialising. And I can still do that.
yeah. But you just find that so many people now are coming
yeah,
to
yeah.
you. Is it because it's becoming a bigger issue, or is it just because we're more aware
I
of
think
you?
there's more awareness
Yeah.
about NPD and narcissism in general,
Yeah.
mostly thanks to what's coming out of America.
Yeah.
There aren't that many UK specialists in narcissistic abuse in terms of therapy. So I have people come to me to say, thank God I found you.
Yeah.
I've Googled you. I've Googled narcissistic abuse, really nothing in my area. So
Okay.
it's quite good. Yeah.
Okay, so on one level that could be seen as a good thing, that like with any kind of illness or something that has to come out, it has to come to the surface first to be recognized
Yeah.
and then leave. So,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
more awareness that is spread about it, then that
Yeah,
can be seen
and
as a
for
good sign.
clients, it takes a high level of motivation and
Yeah.
courage, and not letting guilt get in the way of the healing work.
Yeah, guilt or regrets.
Yeah, that I feel bad that I'm saying this about my parents.
Oh, right,
You
yes.
can't afford that.
Yes, you've really got to get down and start doing the work.
Absolutely, and the range of, we spoke about the range of impacts that I'm noticing.
Yeah.
Substance abuse,
Right.
addictive behaviours, real isolation and withdrawal from life, self-doubt, loss of ability to listen to your own instincts, after years of being gaslighted and having emotions and beliefs invalidated. Anxiety is a big one,
Yeah.
which tends to come out in early 20s, late teens, especially as panic attacks, trust issues, negative core beliefs, adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue syndrome. There are lots of physical impacts as well. You can get addicted to the narcissist physiologically, so there's an obsession with them that can last for years, particularly after relationship breakups, dissociation, depression. And then that leads, often they notice they're bullied at work, they attract narcissistic friends,
Right.
they want to know about how to set boundaries in place for narcissists. So the impacts are wide-ranging.
Yeah, there's definitely like a resonance. We often attract people
Yeah.
in our lives that are resonating at a certain frequency or into the same things. But so yeah, and then that's a good way of noticing changes as well, because you notice things. You're out of sync with people after a certain point, and then you attract
Absolutely.
more people into your life.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, the scapegoat is often the sensitive child to start with.
Yeah.
And so they already maybe feel that pathological inner loneliness, I don't fit in, without realising that actually they're really special people.
Yeah.
So it's turning that around, that self-concept, and saying, actually, you've been picked on because you're pretty special.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
And it's looking at the evidence as
Okay,
well.
so that's a good way of helping them. Is there other strategies that
Yeah,
you
so we
generally
do,
employ?
the inner child work I think is the most transformative. So validating the story, we look at how they are these days, and I'll be very challenging and honest with them and say, well, maybe your behaviour is a bit narcissistic. It's not that I'm trying, they're not narcissists,
Yeah.
but we can have fleas
Yeah.
from that upbringing. And often clients, especially women who've lived with a narcissistic mother, are in receipt of her envy.
Right.
This is a big trait. So them coming to realise they can learn self-care, they can get that beauty treatment, there won't be consequences from the narc mother
Yeah.
is bigger than you'd think. The critical inner voice, as you say, takes years, recognising that. We do some, CBT, managing emotional flashbacks, self-compassion, that they see that they are fallible, complex human beings who have value simply because they exist.
Yeah.
Because they can be very hard on themselves.
Yeah,
because
for
the
sure.
idea is they're carrying this belief, I'm not good enough.
Yeah, and that's a very common one, and one that needs to be healed. And you say you notice that a lot of people are in their 50s and going through that time
Absolutely,
of
yeah.
self-realization.
Yeah.
You know.
But as attached to the parent, as
Yeah.
a child.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
And then there's grieving. The
Yeah.
initial work involves a huge amount of grieving
Yeah.
for the losses of childhood
Yeah.
and coming to terms with the fact the parent has a disorder
Yeah.
and can't love them.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of grieving work, a lot of crying
Yeah.
to be done. I also advocate a good academic knowledge of NPD, so you can get that observer thing going on. You can be with them and say, that's the NPD. That's
Yeah.
not personal to me.
Okay.
And that helps.
Yeah, I bet.
And then learning boundaries. There are many ways to instill boundaries. There's always a cost of dealing with a narcissist.
Yeah.
You can either flatter them and be very pleasant, or you can name their behaviours. Either way, there'll be some sort of consequence.
A consequence, like in terms of them learning about what they're doing, or they're
Yeah, they
they're-
don't like to be told.
Yeah.
They don't like to be criticised. Their defences that cause the disorder will not like that.
Yeah.
And if you're not used to being, overly charming yourself, shall we say,
Yeah.
they can sort of see through that as well, and they don't like you for that. So it's
Oh.
a no-win.
Yeah.
So you decide what costs. You feel it out often in the moment.
Yeah.
But it's never going to feel comfortable, and you can't really relax around them. So.
Yeah.
But there will be shocks in store. That's one thing for sure.
Yeah.
Something will be said or done that is really hurtful, and the decision is, can I keep taking this?
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. And is there any way that they can be changed? I guess not, unless they don't want to.
Well, they don't think there's anything wrong with them.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
And there are some who go to therapy,
Yeah.
and they can be shown ways to put themselves in the other person's position.
Yeah.
I often find, if I say to a narcissist, that person that you really favour, can you imagine how they would feel if that happened?
Yeah.
Something that happened to you. Then they kind of get it. So there are kind of some ways.
Yeah.
They often leave therapy. They're not known for staying in therapy and doing the hard work.
The people that I know that have these characteristics, they don't want to sit with themselves and their feelings, because that would mean having to deal with things.
They
And so
cannot accept blame.
it's all avoidance and distraction.
It's your fault.
This is where the OCD comes in as well. Just a constant activity to keep doing things, to not have to sit and just feel what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, OCD is related to a feeling of a lack of safety in childhood, but the narcissist will say it's your fault.
Right.
That's the one thing you can be sure of. It's all quite simple, really.
Yeah.
And they have the power you give them, but many people build it up into they have some sort of supernatural power. And there is this theory that they have this kind of psychic link into you, that they can drain you from a distance or sense you. So I work with some clients to do what's called psychic cord cutting, which seems to work.
Yeah.
So.
I've come across that before, and this chap who talks about, in relationships anyway, going for no contact, that, and I think I've experienced this myself, when you're thinking about somebody, they kind of know it, like, especially if you're attracted to someone and you're thinking about them a lot, somehow they know it, and that can kind of kill the attraction and things like that. But when you do no contact, they somehow know about it.
Yeah.
And so that's what sometimes you get people phoning you if you feel like you're not in contact or things like that. So that's an interesting kind of connection. You do have these things, I think.
Yeah, totally. And that seems to work for them.
Yeah.
But there are people with narcissistic traits are not uncommon.
Yeah.
There was a recent piece on BBC, a mental health advocate, saying he thinks 13% of the UK population has a personality disorder. So if you put narcissism at about 5%, which aligns with the 6% in the US.
Yeah.
But I think it's slightly more common than that, personally.
I think it is as well. I think the consequences and the victims of personality disorders are more than that.
Absolutely.
The symptoms, how people feel about themselves, the self-critic sort of things is probably the majority of people, I think, at the moment.
I agree. Yeah, the wider impact
Yeah.
on you. But there are ways to kind of tell if you're with a narcissist. Very simply, don't ignore the red flags of your gut feeling in your body. How does your body feel? Are they overtly charming beyond the norm?
Yeah.
And is that making you feel great? Do you feel the urge to tell them everything about yourself?
Right.
Do you feel incredibly excited in their presence? All of these are warning signs.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Don't share too much,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah, I've made that mistake in the past. But when you treat people, have you seen good results? Have there been?
I really have, actually.
Yeah.
I've seen. I'm really pleased to report that there is a turnaround in most clients.
Does it take various
it's wonderful to
amounts
see.
of times?
I think we can see 6 or 7 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't do very long-term work. I think I expect high motivation up front.
Yeah.
I do set homework, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But it seems to be working.
Okay, that's good to hear.
And getting some good comments, yeah.
Okay, so is there anything else you wanted to share? Obviously, I'll have your contact details on the show page of the Mental Health Matters podcast episode, so people can get in touch, and if they want to get in touch to find out more and find out how you can help them. Is there anything more about the details or things to look out for?
I get quite often asked, why do I attract narcissists? It might be, for example, you were brought up by a narcissistic parent, so you're familiar with that cold energy.
Yeah.
And it's still an attempt by your subconscious to get love from that parent.
Right, yeah.
You might have a limited self-concept or low self-worth. Being told you're wonderful is very seductive.
It is, yeah.
But then everything becomes about pleasing the narc and codependently focusing on their needs. Then you get devalued and discarded. Or many coverts can have very long-term marriages and they have those enablers. who are literally unable to see what's really going on.
Yeah.
Because they're so good at being the victim.
Yeah.
They incite very much, protectiveness from those around them.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so, don't be drawn in. You might be drawn in fact, by their victim tales because you're very sensitive and sympathetic. So
Yeah.
be aware not to, believe stuff necessarily.
Yeah.
Make your own mind up.
Yeah, so when you meet people, it's good to be open, and if they're nice, it's all good. But just, I guess it comes from the self-work we can do on ourselves, the self-love, get stronger within ourselves,
Yeah.
and then we can listen to our intuition a lot easier.
It is about developing that self-concept
Yeah.
that didn't get developed in childhood.
Yeah.
Who am I? What
Yeah.
do I feel? This is my emotional and physical needs, and I'm
Yeah.
going to tell you what they are.
Yeah.
This is really about that kind of transformation.
Yeah, are there any little tricks, quick things that you can suggest? Positive self-talk's a big one, and that kind of good steps that people can take to.
Not really.
Yeah,
I'm not.
just-
I'm not really a great one for affirmations necessarily.
Yeah.
I think and it's very personal to each person.
Sure.
But just remember when you're with them, if you know the signs, just be aware that it's not personal, really.
Yeah.
Don't let that hurt. Imagine a bubble around yourself.
Yeah.
And you are protected. If you want to do that very quickly, and outside of that bubble is an impenetrable material,
Yeah.
and you're with them, but you're not with them.
Yeah.
That's a very quick piece of advice.
Yeah, that helps. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Lorna. Thanks for your time, and
Thank you.
good to meet you finally. And also, that's great that you're able to embrace this work. And after being on the previous version of Mental Health Matters, it's great that you're back.
It's lovely to be back. Thank you
Fantastic.
very
We'll
much.
see you again. Thank you.
Take care.